Hello, hello, hello. Hey guys, very excited to bring you to this next episode. I have with me here Christine Sullivan, who's a very interesting person to talk to because of multiple reasons. To start off with, I've known her for almost 5 years since I started Silq. She was an advisor to Silq, having worked in a number of companies that effectively could have been clients of ours. And then she made the great choice of coming onto the other side, and now she's part of the team here at Silq. So she's got a very interesting perspective on both sides of being a buyer of the services that we deliver, and also as now a seller of the services we deliver. So I'm going to let Christine quickly introduce herself, but from my perspective, I'll give you very quick, interesting anecdotes of what I know about Christine. So she's based out of Dallas, Texas. She's worked at a number of licensed merchandise apparel manufacturing brands, and not just apparel accessories as well. I let her speak to some of the brands she's represented, some of the interesting companies she's represented. She's worked with amazing music bands, and for all of them, she's made very, very interesting apparel, accessories, a whole bunch of other products from around the world. So today we're going to spend a little time talking about the kind of challenges that goes with working in licensed apparel manufacturing or licensed product manufacturing, and also the broader global supply chain challenges necessarily that she's effectively dealing with or she's dealt with in her previous roles. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm presenting to you Christine Sullivan. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rom. I'm excited to be here. So I've been in the industry for 12 plus years. Kind of like you said, licensing was definitely something I had fixated on for over 8 years. But really, my background all started back when I was sewing clothes on my Barbie dolls. I kind of knew, like, hey, I really like fashion, I like apparel. So I went to school from there and pursued fashion design as my degree. Got my first job making evening gowns, wedding dresses right out the gate. And then I was like, hey, I got to try something else. What else can I do? And that's when I was lucky enough to get a job at World, which is a manufacturer for licensed products and goods, mostly entertainment licenses. So I was there for a
Nice.
while. We made a lot of fun stuff. Anime was very trendy then, so we did a lot of anime. And that's also then when I was like, okay, what else? What's my next step here? What's the next play I can have? And that's luckily where I got a job at Global Merchandising Services, also where I connected with you. We kind of built a further, deeper relationship. We used Silk, and I was doing licensing for 80 plus music bands. I'm talking metal, rock, some pop. We had
Yeah.
Backstreet Boys, we had Iron Maiden, we had, the whole trifecta of everything. So that was very fun. And then it just seemed natural that my next step would be the full circle picture of, okay, let me dabble in freight forwarding to get the full supply chain. So here I am today at Silk, and I'm excited to close that loop and kind of be the perspective of the client and, build those relationships with our clients.
Thank you, thank you. And I know I would be, I would definitely want to say this. Like, I'm extremely grateful for the fact that you chose this decision to kind of come onto the other side. I think there's a lot of interesting perspectives that you bring to the table, and I don't say this enough, but I'm ever so grateful when people trust us to take that leap of faith from their careers wherever they are in their previous roles and across everybody. 70 odd employees, direct full-time employees at Silk, every single one of them have made the choice to kind of come on and make this, a truly defining experience for a number of importers today. So I'm ever so grateful for that. So thank you for that. Um, Now, again, before we jump into the meat of the whole show, I want to do a quick round of introduction for people who are listening to this for the first time about me. I'm Ram, the founder and CEO of Silk. We are essentially a quality inspections and a freight forwarding service provider. We work with importers in America, Canada, majority of them based out of here, who effectively buy merchandise overseas. We provide boots on the ground services with about 300 inspectors in the field who go to the factories to inspect merchandise as product gets ready and effectively use those insights to plan efficient shipping to get cargo into the United States in a timely fashion, make sure that the product is actually, what you actually ordered at the factory, and making sure that you're checking all the boxes from a compliance perspective. It's ever so important today than ever to make sure you pay attention to compliance, and we deliver that value significantly better than anybody else in the market, just because of the leverage we have at origin, which is where the product gets made. So that's what we do. So without further ado, jumping into essentially what we're going to be talking about today. So again, as I told you at the beginning, how a former customer of ours is essentially now powering that same service and delivering that superior experience to clients is kind of what we're going to kind of delve into. So perhaps let's kind of go into your career journey there for a second. I know you gave us an intro, but let's kind of dive deeper into it. For the listeners, tell us a little bit about what is licensed apparel manufacturing. What does that effectively mean?
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of like we're the middleman. We're working in between the buyers, retailers, or maybe it's e-commerce. We're working between them. We're also working with the actual licenses. So the people that actually have the rights for the band or the entertainment license. We're kind of the middle person where we're bridging what do you want? What do you have? Let's make a product that can merge into something. And then from the places that I've worked at, we're also the production house. So we're also working with the factories getting that made. So yeah, I guess you're working with three different stakeholders there. You have the licensor, the buyer, and the factory, and we're the person that has to get all of those things together and kind of make that final product. All the places I've worked at, I'm not sure if it's standard, but we were also the design house. So we had in-house design teams that would take the assets that were provided by the licensee. They would put that on the product, mold it into whatever the buyer wanted, pitch it to the buyer, see if the buyer liked it. And if they wanted that from the CAD, luckily we were securing orders from CADs. And then we could get that product made overseas. But then there's all the intricacies of every single CAD that the buyer confirms also needs to get sent to the licensor. They need to give their stamp of approval. We would call that a concept approval. Once they concept approve, the licensor and the buyer both still need to now see a sample. So then we would get sample approval from the buyer, sample approval from the licensor. And once that happened, we could finally go to production. And then when production was done, we also had to make finalized contractual samples or top of production samples that would get sent to the buyer again and the licensor again to make sure that production actually matched what our pre-production sample looked like. If that's all good, then we can finally deliver to the store and get things shipped to the
Okay.
customers. So yeah, lots of juggling.
That's a lot of juggling. So effectively, to kind of simplify this in some ways for me, right? I mean, again, I'm not from this universe, so even though I've worked with these customers, I kind of know some of it now. But just to kind of kind of sum this up in some ways, if you are today an influencer, a band, you're a popular personality, and you believe putting a picture of yours on a t-shirt would sell, or frankly, it could be any merchandise, then effectively, instead of that brand taking their eye off the ball, or a music band, for example, taking the eye off the ball from producing music, and they start focusing on producing t-shirts, they're going to lose focus. So they effectively work with a company like yours, or at least your previous employer, to be like, hey, I am, part of, I represent Backstreet Boys. I'm going to come to you and say, hey, we think people will buy t-shirts with Backstreet Boys on it or whatever product. And so they come to you, and you guys effectively take that and say, okay, we'll take this concept, build something out of it, come present some solutions to you. You like it, we'll take that entire responsibility of bringing this product to life with your blessing, effectively,
Right.
and then getting it delivered. Would that do
Yeah.
justice to what
Yeah,
how this
there's
works?
there's definitely like a contractual agreement. We're all signing on the dotted line because obviously they need to get their profit off of everything we make. So there is a
Gotcha.
margin that they're making off of that product. And it gets a little hairy too because a contract can maybe be only for a year, 5 years, and then at that point, if say that band or that entertainment license did not like how you as a licensed manufacturer was operating, they could just go and pick somebody else and sign a contract
Oh.
with them. So it is very competitive as well to try to maintain those contracts for those licenses and keep them happy. But yes, your summary was pretty spot on.
Gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. So anytime I'm seeing a Disney T-shirt, or I don't know, a Mickey Mouse T-shirt, that does not necessarily mean Disney made that T-shirt themselves. I'm just using that as an
Right.
example here, right? They could be effectively working with a company like yours, or the previous company you worked for, and say, okay, we're going to give you the Mickey Mouse license to be sold all over America for an next period of time, and then you effectively then have some contractual obligations to fulfill to make sure you represent Mickey Mouse in a particular way. Mickey
Yes.
Mouse is wearing the standard colors, and now all of a sudden we're not giving Mickey Mouse a Vibgee or wash, trying to
Yes.
make them look different. You have to adhere to some standards. And so, you know, eh, this kind of, begs the question. You're kind of working with a two-headed snake in some ways, right? You have to effectively please the license owner,
Mhm.
who effectively could be, some person of power. And then you also have to work with retailers who effectively are going to buy this product and sell. This could be,
Right.
popular companies like Hot Topic and, Paxson and a whole bunch of others. And likewise, all the way down to like the Targets and the Walmarts of the world effectively as well. So you had to
Yes.
get them to agree to. So you have a two-headed snake. You got to manage both of their expectations at the same
Mhm.
time, manage your costs and your vendors. So that's a
Right.
tricky place to be.
Yes, yeah, it was you know what? It's an experience, that it was the only experience I really had. I never did manufacturing outside of licensing, so I don't really know, "Hey, could it be easier?" Not sure, but definitely, I think the learning curve whenever I would hire new employees is just like, "Okay, I really need to explain to you why licensing is so different," and it is that two-headed snake. It's getting both the buyer and the licensor on the same page because, everyone thinks they have, the best idea, the best product in mind. And
Yeah.
sometimes getting those two to agree is really, really difficult. There's definitely been times where there's lost orders, there's money on the table because you just can't get those two to agree on something and you just can't move forward. Or you get a concept approval, you get your sample in and you sample it 5 different times. It keeps getting rejected. It never gets approved
Jesus.
because the licensor is so picky and then you just can't move forward. So yeah, it's definitely a juggling act for everybody.
Listen, in this age of AI, like at least I'm grateful to hear that there's a human being who's actually seeing it and improving it. So that's the
Yep.
the seeing the cup half full scenario. But at the same time, I can understand, human emotion. It could be very tricky to handle.
Yeah.
Um, but with a lot of money on the table, right? It can be. It is worth it at the end of the day. There are companies who profit from it, who do really well at it, and frankly also deliver some amazing experiences for the fans out there. So
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it's a win-win. So let's abstract a little bit further from here, right? So let's talk about, you're working for this, large licensed merchandising outfit. You worked for many of them in the past. Now you are working with a large amount of retailers. You're talking with a large amount of licensees, like within, I imagine, right? And correct me if I'm wrong here, give me some rope. If you're working with, let's say, a Disney, they could be like 15 different brands you might have with, or licenses you might have with Disney. So it's 15 different people you're working with effectively, even though it's just one company. Or is that different where you're dealing with just one person for you for all intents and purposes
I
to
would
get
say,
approvals?
yeah, it's case by case. Honestly, every single company and license is a little different. Like Disney is a good example because they do have so many entities or different
Yeah.
licenses underneath them. So yes, and then it gets more specific too, where maybe I knew at BioWorld we would have the Marvel license, but we only had it to put on sleepwear and underwear product. Someone else had a special contract where they could do Marvel for actual like apparel and clothing and t-shirts. So it can get really hairy and very specific. So yes, it would be different people depending on that. When I moved to global, it got a little cleaner. I guess bands probably want things a little more streamlined and easy. So it was kind of like one band, head to toe, anything you could think of, accessories, home goods, all that. You would have a contract for that. And then you would have one point person, and that would be who you would talk to. And sometimes too, the bands like Backstreet Boys, they always wanted a sample for each of them. So they would
Okay.
all physically see a sample themselves. So it just depends. And then other bands are like, I don't care. My manager can approve everything. I don't need to see it. So it really is case by case on what license you're working with.
You have a lot over there, and I want to unpack some of that because there was one part that was funny. And keep this PC, but still, Marvel underwear, keeping it hairy. Like it was so funny to be like, yeah, for everybody out there who's buying Superman underwear and all that.
Yes.
Hey, there's a lot that goes into it. Just to be clear, it's not
Mhm.
easy.
Yeah.
But kind of going into it, also just to kind of cover this piece. Also, I'm always struck by some of these amazing bands out there. Do you get to meet them? Do you get to hang out with them?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was definitely a perk whenever I would interview employees. I'd be like, oh, a fun thing that gets to happen is, typically we do get the VIP tickets, friends and family seats
Nice.
at concerts. So, yeah, sometimes there were backstage passes. You could meet people. They
That's
were
awesome.
definitely in high demand. So, it depends on how many seats were left. So, yeah, that was definitely a fun perk.
If I were in that spot, I'd be like, yeah, you better, give me that good seat. Otherwise, your t-shirts are not going to look the way you want it. But
Yeah. Right.
kind of coming back in and not to get distracted totally here, right? So you're dealing with, a large number of stakeholders here, and you're dealing with a large number of retailers effectively who have to then ultimately buy and sell those products for you in order for you guys to make your end of the bargain and the band gets their end of the bargain. So how does this operate at scale? Like you're talking about companies both the companies that we that you used to work for, like hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. right? And they have global contracts, they have global offices, they're selling products all around the world. There's product conformity requirements, there's
Mhm.
care labels in different languages that need to go into it. Like, walk me through at a high level, what does project management look like? Are we like, is it do you have tools that enable you guys to kind of visualize what's going on across the entire I don't know, portfolio?
Right. World, I will say from a tech standpoint, they're obviously they've been in the industry for a long time too. They had more, I would say, platforms and technology that we could use. We had PLM systems. We
Yeah.
had just right when I was leaving, they had migrated to Centric, which is an amazing PLM system. So there's definitely stuff
Nice.
in there where you can store. You also have all your purchase orders in there. But then on the back end and the flip side at most of these companies too, there's a lot of Google Docs. There's a lot of just,
Right.
manual sheets out there. Because especially when you're working with so many retailers, every single retailer has a vendor guide. And, those vendor guides can be 400 pages, just depends. And so you're also having to store all of those documents, digest all that information, and then spit it back out. We also used a lot of tools that were specifically for project management, like Rike or Asana.
Hmm.
That could keep us on track, set deadlines. We would like to do most of our design work in there. We would set projects up, communicate with the designers, tell them when we needed it by, and then that would pop back out. But really, I think the foundation of what most companies need is a PLM system,
Okay.
especially for licensing. We could upload our artwork, our assets in there. It would pop out the style number. We could assign it retailers. It would then tag the next person to make the tech pack, tag the next person to make a spec. Everything would get built in the system. Then that would get spit back out directly to the factory through the system. They would get that email. They'd make the sample, and then sample comments would go back in. So yeah, PLM was like where everything needed to live. And then there's obviously a purchase order platform where you're spitting out the orders as well.
That's ERP, yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
absolutely. I think, for all the people who are listening, especially the brands out there who are starting out or in the early stages of their stuff, like, obviously you want to keep cost, you want to be cost conscious, so you do make some difficult choices. But from what I can tell from whatever you just said, I think investing in a PLM is probably a wise investment as you get to a little bit of complexity in your supply chain, whether it's multiple retailers, a large number of SKUs, or even frankly multiple suppliers and multiple countries you produce in. You probably want to think about PLMs as a worthy investment. And we have a number of recommendations we can give you guys. Centric, as she said, is definitely one of the ones that we've heard a lot, and there's quite a few others. And we'll make sure that we leave them in the comments for you guys with links to some of those companies. Feel free to check them out and let us know if you can be of help. So coming back to uh, what we were talking about. So you're dealing with all this complexity. You're dealing with effectively managing, from concept to delivery, and you need to kind of
Mhm.
manage all of this across all these stakeholders. What parts of those do you think are transferable skills for somebody, and coming into the other side of the table where you're selling these services of managing that complexity effectively, right? So you're dealing with, in all of the companies you represented are effectively our customers at some point today. We work with them in different capacities. Some of them we do inspections and shipping, some of them we do just inspection, some of them we do shipping only. It's a combination of all different factors. So what skills do you think are transferable just coming into the supply chain world or the services world of what we do today?
I think the number one thing that comes to mind is customer service, right? So, like, no matter where I've been working with retailers, buyers, license clients here, it's going to be customer service is number one. That's going to be king. But then you also have all the skill sets of, you have tight timelines, you have deadlines, you have dates that you need to hit. A big thing we used in the production world, is time and action calendars, working
Yeah.
backwards from that, setting your drop dead dates of when you need things by. I think that's an easy thing to transition over to account management and freight forwarding. Okay, let's work backwards. If we know that a client needs this in their hands by a certain date, let's set up some timelines like we have in the app, milestones, to make sure that we're marching towards the same date. You also have the factor of understanding people's margins. Obviously, cost is very important for people to formulate into their cost of goods for their final pricing. So me coming from a perspective of, yeah, I understand that 10 cents sometimes is a deal breaker when it's on that item. So trying to figure out how we can finagle that here and give everyone the best cost, but also hit their timeline and their delivery. Yeah, merging all of those things. It's kind of, and it's from that industry as well. It's a juggling act. And I feel like, everything, and freight forwarding is also a juggling act. You have multiple
Yeah.
clients, you have tons of shipments, you have different timelines you're also trying to monitor. So, someone that can stay on track, stay organized, and multitask is also going to be important.
Nice, nice. Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine the attention to detail. I mean, frankly, that's one thing that we found interesting at Silk is like we found people with that merchandising, sourcing, production experience, who frankly have been on the other side of the table, are incredibly great account managers. You guys have the empathy because when you work with our customers who are in those booths and you've been like, hey, I've been there, done that kind of
Yes.
situation, it goes a very long way, right? And clients tend to, rely on you guys for that kind of advice to be like, we work in supply chain. This isn't, AI. This isn't just a predictable. There's a lot of unpredictability in this. There's geopolitics. There's, you know, freaking weather systems around the world
Yes.
can, make life impossible, right? So just that experience is, yeah, we found that to be incredibly valuable. I couldn't, speak greatly about it enough. This is just, it's been incredible for us. So that kind of brings me into, probably, there's a little segue into this, right? What do you see the role of AI? This is a little bit of a zinger for you. What do you think is the role of AI in all this? Do you think AI is going to make life better, easy, faster, given that time is of essence in this business?
I am definitely a proponent of let's use AI to benefit and make us more efficient. Do I think it's going to replace us? No, but I also feel like if you're not utilizing that tool out there, you're falling behind from all your counterparts that are using AI to,
Hmm.
make things more streamlined, make everything more efficient. So why not try? I know it's probably a lot for people to digest, especially if they haven't tried to use AI yet.
Yeah.
But if you're not using that, I mean, you're just going to fall behind because everyone's going to start utilizing that. And I think there's amazing ways, even at like a low level of just trying to figure out how can I make my workday more efficient, going in using an AI tool, giving them all of your tasks for the day and asking for it to spit back out something that maybe could be a more efficient way for you to operate. I've also seen people use AI tools that can automate, hey, every month I need to send out a certain email to all these clients. It can automate and send that for you. From the flip side of being a director, having to train people and write SOPs, I also know amazing AI tools that can literally watch your screen as you're recording, walking through
Oh,
steps of something and spit back out a whole SOP for you that is formulated with video and context. So like those tools are amazing. And if we didn't have AI, we would be making these things manually still. And that's just so time consuming. So I feel like people need to start jumping on that bandwagon before it's too late.
that sounds amazing and scary at the same time. Somebody looking at
Yeah.
all everything on your screen. I mean, I can't imagine what that privacy concern looks like. But I do agree with you, right? Like, as someone who lives with ADHD on a regular basis, that's kind of what makes me a pretty decent founder, I think. But also kind of comes with the downsides. I think a tool like that to help you kind of formulate your ideas and your thoughts and like kind of give you a process to work through. I think it sounds incredible, especially with the complexity we were talking about for licensed apparel brands, right? Like
Right.
you have multiple stakeholders and you have multiple people you have to satisfy. So that makes a lot of sense. So let's kind of dive a little bit deeper into the sourcing universe and the production universe, right? And I'm going to kind of speak about this from the perspective of where we are today in this current environment. Now, again, this isn't new to people in the sourcing world. The tariff situation, we've experienced some of this in the previous term of the current president we have, and now we're experiencing some of that a little bit more probably accentuated today in the second term. There's a lot of geopolitics that kind of drives all of this, right? So we've seen that brands try and try again to kind of move from one country like China, for example, to another country and so on and so forth. um, and today it used to be China plus one, then it became Vietnam, and then now it's Vietnam plus one, and like there's a lot of moving parts here. So, from your perspective, especially with that in context, where do you think Silk delivers the most value for brands who are essentially, managing this complexity today?
I would feel like the inspection service is a great starting point, especially in the fact that Silk, we can inspect a factory, we can do a factory audit. So if you're a company that's trying to diversify your matrix and trying to get into other countries or even a different factory, it's very hard. You're not going to want to spend the money to send your team, go overseas. You could actually just, I think it's what,
200
199.
bucks,
Yeah,
$199. Yeah.
you can send Silk and they can go audit your factory. I think that's an amazing thing that I mean, clients should be utilizing right now if they're trying to expand their matrix and go into other factories. Also, for the freight forwarding aspect, if maybe you were having historical issues going and using a country that wants to work FOB, X works, all those other not non DDP, you would have that option now with Silk where they can be your freight forwarder and get those goods. Because I know a lot of places and places I've been maybe weren't as strong in freight forwarding directly, and they really do need someone that can handle that. And know the ins
Yeah.
and outs and give us all of the extensive details that maybe we didn't have time to focus on. So, yeah, I think the inspections at the factory for diversifying is an amazing thing that should be utilized more. Um, and then also just using Silk as your freight forwarder if you haven't been moving shipments from these countries before could be a relatively good alternative to maybe what you were historically doing, which was probably fixating in one country that you're familiar with or a
Yeah.
factory that was providing DDP and doing all of that for you, but it might not have been as cost competitive, or maybe the transit time wasn't as great. Where Silk, we can try to be more competitive there.
Absolutely. That actually brings me to this question, right? Like, fashion traditionally has been heavily a DDP, mode of shipping necessarily. And for those listeners who don't know what DDP is, the freight terms are basically who picks up what cost necessarily between the buyer and the seller of merchandise. So if you're a buyer of merchandise, you're buying products from overseas, from let's say China or Vietnam or wherever. You're agreeing to the supplier that, hey, I'm going to pay you whatever $10 is for this T-shirt, and I'm buying 15,000 T-shirts from you, but you're going to cover the cost up until either your factory door, and I have to pick it up from there, or you bring it to the port. So if you're picking it up from the factory, it's X works. If you pick it up from the port in, let's call it Shanghai, it's FOB. If you say, I'm going to pick it up at the port in LA, and factory, you're responsible to bring it to LA, that's CIF. And then effectively, if you're saying, no, deliver it to my warehouse, everything encumbered, I'm going to pay you a full and final price. I don't care what you do. And that effectively means DDP. You're bringing it to your, effectively, to your warehouse, and all responsibility is on this overseas entity necessarily. Now, there are definitely downsides to it. We've spoken about this in previous podcasts with other guests along the way. But in your perspective, right, where does Silk uniquely position itself, especially in this environment today? Where do you think we fit in your perspective, having been on both sides?
I think it's a service that, people need to be utilizing. Like specifically when I was at Global, we really did focus on, hey, we got to go DDP. It was kind of from upper management down, just only do DDP. We just want one cost. It's more streamlined and efficient for us to receive one final cost versus maybe having to add in a freight forwarder cost after. Then you have customs and duties and compounding all of those things. So it was probably more for ease, but that doesn't mean it's the most cost efficient way. It also doesn't mean it's going to give you the best delivery time frame. Usually
Experience, yeah.
there's issues where, yeah, there's delays that are out of our control. And then unfortunately you would put the factory, since they were giving us the DDP cost, they're now going to be liable for any chargebacks. So sometimes you're also burning bridges, and you're not building up strong relationships, because if goods are late, you're going to have to pin it back on that client, and they have to eat that. And I've been in situations where that bill ended up being more than the profit of what that would have been for them. So they end
Wow.
up losing money. So it is a hard thing to deliver and give them that information. But I feel like Silk can kind of go in and help bridge those companies that need to work with factories that are FOB. They can give you more eyesight on what's happening with the product once it does actually exit the factory. Whereas historically working DDP, there was no transparency. There was no, hey, this is where it's at right now. It was just, okay, did it exit? Yes. Okay, now what happens? We just wait till it gets to the
It's
warehouse
a
and
black
someone
box.
confirms. Yes. Even when you have someone that's all they do all day, they're trying to call, get a hold of the freight forwarders. Now you have an X number of freight forwarders, because every single factory would have their own freight forwarder and multiples. So then it's like, okay, well, I don't even know who to contact to call to ask if my order is going to be on time. I would just have to go and get a hold of the factory, wait for the factory to get back. So Silk really is merging all of those things together in the app, where you can visually go and check. You don't have to
Hmm.
email someone. You don't have to wait. I could just hop in, look at where my shipment was, track it, monitor it, and hopefully you can preemptively call out, this looks like it has a delay. Let me go communicate this to the customer. Because the big thing you're going to get from all retailers and buyers is they just want to plan out. They're open to buy where their dollars are.
Yes.
So if there's a week delay, if it slides into the next month, it's a really big deal for them. So maybe giving them that information to them a week or two in advance versus if you're working DDP, you're not going to usually know until right when you need to book that appointment to get to the warehouse. It gives the buyers a friendlier customer service because they're getting more information timely from you. So I think Silq is definitely something that should be utilized more, especially in places that we're working DDP. Maybe there's a transition that can happen where you can provide your retailers with more consistent, timely customer service.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense, and it's actually an interesting perspective that you bring, right? Because, um, listen, from the perspective of an American freight forwarder or an American company, for that matter, the concept of DDP is there's a lot of gray area there. In some ways, we've thought about it, right? There's a compliance angle, there is effectively visibility angle of when things are going to be here and all that stuff. Taking the compliance out, we're not talking about laws over here. We don't make laws here; we follow them. So, in that perspective, just looking at the idea that from what you tell me is like, hey, we want that simplified cost structure. We want to know this product is going to land at $5, and so
Mhm.
I can now sell it, $6 or $7 or $8, and I know what I'm making. It's that particular value that seems to be driving this decision entirely on whether to go DDP or FOB. Am I far from the truth
That's
here?
That's 100% accurate. It's a really big thing, especially, I guess, for licensing manufacturers as well, because we're providing a wholesale probably 6 months before the product actually lands in the store. So that wholesale is being given to the buyer. They're already formulating their retail. That's when they automatically go into the system and they make those price tickets. So now you have a printed retail price that was based on a wholesale price because they needed to hit their margin and we needed to hit our margin. So if anything changes along the way, it can be really frustrating. It's like, okay, well, are we going to take a lower margin or is the retailer going to take a lower margin? Oh, if they don't
Wow.
want a lower margin, then do we now need to go reorder all the price tickets? Is it already ticketed? Okay, now we need to reorder and reticket. So now we need to pay for all of that service. So yeah, having that solid
Wow.
DDP cost, it's great for us, the third party manufacturer and the retailer. However, I know if I was sitting in the factory's shoes, they're definitely taking on a lot of risk there because they're trying to hold and confirm a price that could fluctuate at any point in time, especially with freight forwarding and the tariffs. They can't
Yeah.
control if that fluctuates up and down. So they're
Yeah.
taking on a lot of liability for us.
Absolutely. And like, in this world of digital universe, the AI and all that stuff we're talking about, man, it comes down to that price tag that's printed. That can't be changed. Like you can't just digitally change that. You got to print
Right.
like 10,000 price tags. It's
Yep.
it's insane. Like, I couldn't like for all the frustration we have with, DDP coming in and all that stuff, like there is a real impact here, right? It's not just about the price and the duties and the tariff. It's like, hey, you can't change the price tag. It's already written over there, right? That's
Yeah.
fascinating. Okay. So now you effectively have to plan this out so far ahead. You are thinking about, what is the timeline? Like, let's say, what is a production timeline in the world of, licensed apparel? Like, if you, let's say today maybe not me, let's say we're going to a popular influencer. I don't care, but we'll pick anybody, right? Joe Rogan. And so we want to go make, we strike a deal. The first conversation you have with Joe Rogan says, yes, this is kind of what I want to make. I want to make t-shirts. I want to make hats. I want to make this and that. How long does it take from that point, that conversation? Like, give me a buffered up number to be like, what does it
Right.
take to be like, you have your stock on the store shelf? What does the timeline look like?
Yeah. There's a lot of factors. So for license specific, obviously it is longer because of all those things we've talked about. You have all these extra
Approvals.
steps of approvals. But from a merchandising standpoint, I was honestly pitching trends about a year out. We could wait about 9 months, but really that would sometimes be cutting it close, especially if it was something that was going to be cut and sew made overseas. But pretty much if it's holiday 2024, I was pitching trends for holiday 2025. So about a year out. Then we would give, the buyers about a month or so to kind of digest all those trends, come back with what they like. And then at that point, we would start doing what we call development. We would design those concepts, which designing those concepts could take 2 weeks, could take a month, just depends on how many concepts we're pitching. And then after that, we allow them some rounds of revisions because those also get sent to the licensor, get sent to the buyer. They can tweak, make their changes. Hopefully, then you got maybe 2 more weeks that you've eaten through And at that point, you're hoping you have a finalized concept that you can call concept approved. And that's typically in
So
the
now we're at
licensing
month
world.
three. Sorry, like we're at month
Right,
three now. Yeah, more
right.
or less. Okay.
And then at that point, that's when you're hoping, okay, can I get a purchase order now? You've both agreed this concept looks good. Do you
Okay.
want to place your order on this concept? You haven't even seen a sample. And then at
Okay.
that point on, when I would get my purchase order in, my lead times would drastically vary, obviously depending on COO. And also we were working with products that
CO
were
for people who country of origin, where it's
yes,
being made,
yes,
just to be
where
clear.
it's
Yeah.
being made. We also had products that were printed on blanks, so that turnaround 5 weeks. That you're not
Again,
cutting and
for
sewing
people
a
who are
garment.
listening, blanks is like a blank white T-shirt. You're just printing something on it. Versus, like to her point earlier, she was saying cut and sew. That's basically you going to like cut fabric and make shirts or whatever else you're making,
Right.
right? Just to
And
be
a
clear.
lot of those factories too, they might be knitting their fabric. Like, we're starting from the very scratch
Ooh,
ground. So I had factories that were fully vertical and they would knit the factory or the fabric themselves. So patting all of that in. So my various lead times that I would kind of spout off to buyers. Okay, if you have Mexico and we just have a concept approval, and you're placing your order, I can get it to you in 90 to 95 days. If you're
Mexico.
wanting
That's like down the street.
right, right. But that's also I'm padding in. So the time and action calendar I would have to pad, it would vary. So I had different time and action calendars for each licensor. Some licensors were easier, some took longer. I had different time and action calendars for retailers. Some needed extra
Ah,
samples. Some also like we didn't even dabble in fit. Fit's very important to a lot of our
of course,
retailers.
of
You're cutting
course.
and sewing a garment, always want at least 2 rounds of fit there if it's a brand new silhouette
Yeah,
you haven't done. So you're talking about a sample probably takes 4 weeks, just depends. And then if I'm having to make multiples, that's
yeah.
compounding. And then you're also padding in that timeline of I need to ship this sample
Hmm.
to our product development team. They would inspect it, check it, fit all the palms or the points of measure, make sure it's all within tolerance. And then you have to ship it to the buyer and you have to ship it to the licensor and let them review and give their comments. So, yeah, that lead time and that timeline just it all compounds and adds. So, yeah, that's why Mexico would be 90 to 95 days. But then if I go to China, 1 round of sampling, not two, I'm looking at 100 days. If I'm doing
Okay.
2 rounds of sampling, I'm at like
Just marginally
120.
more, huh? That's even though they're so far away. I mean, it's all air
Right.
freighted samples, but still, okay.
Yeah, and then also our Mexico factory was vertical, so they were knitting their fabric, whereas most of our
Okay.
China, they're importing or getting in the bolts of fabric.
That's interesting.
India,
I was always under the impression that Mexico still imported a large part of the raw materials, but I'm surprised to hear they
they
are.
do. They do.
Okay, they do.
Most of them do. It's just we have one factory that we use day in and day out. Actually, I had worked with them at BioWorld, then I also
Okay,
used them at Global. So yeah, they're completely vertical, but it did come with a little bit of extra lead time.
that makes sense.
120 days in China, and then if I ever got to the point where it was a license that I knew was really difficult, it was also a new silhouette, something we hadn't done, then I was sometimes looking at 170 days out from
Jesus
PO
Christ.
placement, but
How do
that's to
you forecast
DC.
that far out? Like so
Right.
many moving parts.
Yes, and then the buyers feel the same way, they're like, "We just can't plan that far ahead," but well, those are the cards we're dealt here. If you're wanting to go that many rounds of fit, if you're wanting the licensor to sign off on this, you also have retailers that they have to approve their TOPs, their top up production. So you're saying I have to get my production made, ship you a piece of that. So now it has to get to you, arrive to you. You have to have time to look at it. Then you need to send me your feedback before I can exit the goods. Okay, you've added just another week
Whew.
or two just because you want to see this extra sample. So yeah, and they all, I mean, they're doing it to themselves because they want to monitor the product. They want to be that strict about it, but it is causing a delay.
I mean, it is delayed, but at the same time, right? They care about quality, and it's something we can all agree that everybody should at some level, right? Because at the end of the day, consumer is paying, I don't know, $50 for a T-shirt that has a license on it versus I don't know, $7 for an Amazon Basics T-shirt. So obviously, it's different. But what's interesting is like we've always given a lot of negative rap for DDP in the forwarding world for people who use that service, but it makes sense, right? From a retailer's perspective or a buyer's perspective, like you're taking so much risk and there's so many things that can change. You want to try to do the best you can to keep the costs fixed as much as you can. Although
Right.
I have no idea how your service providers are able to kind of give you that. We've all seen in 6 months, 6 days, tariffs can change. 6 weeks, things can change. We could be having a war, and now ships can't go through the Suez Canal, and now your rates just went up 2x in shipping. right?
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense. Like, we've always never thought about it from that perspective. We've always been like, but I see the other side right now. But the interesting part that you said that I want to kind of double click on for a second here is, talking about, those long lead times that ultimately lead to DDP and all this stuff. How do you shorten that lead time? Like, that's one of the things that we really want to focus on at Silk is like, hey, how could we accelerate that sampling timeline? Right now, obviously, we can't approve things on behalf of the customer. That's not our job. That's theirs. But we could probably at least eliminate samples. Like, you said it's 4 weeks to do a sampling run. I
Mhm.
imagine, I mean, you could probably give us a breakdown and what constitutes in that 4 weeks. But if there's some place in that middle where Silk can intercept and be like, hey, we're going to check the sample before it even leaves the factory floor. Why waste an extra, whatever, 2, 3 weeks of time to have this shipped and have all these people look at it and then come back and say, no, I don't like it? Can we at least have somebody look at it and be like, does it meet spec? Does it meet the color? Does it
Right.
meet the print requirements? Would that, do you think that makes a difference for companies? I mean, forget DDP, they could be doing DDP for all I care, but
Right.
could we be delivering? Does that make life better?
I do think the PP inspection service, I know it's a model out there that Silk has, and maybe it doesn't get used as often. I've always
Yeah.
thought, well, that would be an amazing way, especially for a company you're just starting out. Maybe you don't have a large product development team. Maybe you don't have the bandwidth or capacity to check every single sample yourself, do all of that work. Utilizing that service and having someone catch that sample right at the factory, you're number one, saving time. You're also
Yeah.
saving money.
Yeah.
So at that point, hopefully they can spot check something. There is always going to be that variable of a buyer says, no, I still want to see that. I need to check it. But there's always negotiations in these things. If a buyer says, I want it by this date, and we would have to go back and say, well, you're going to have to shave off something. Here's what's going to have to give. I think that's an amazing alternative to offer up of, okay, I have someone at the factory that can check this sample that automatically knows I'm not going to have to ship this sample for comments. That should shave
Yeah.
off at least 2 weeks there. And
Yeah.
if that's exactly what you needed, then you've just delivered the goods on time by allowing someone else to view that sample on the floor. Now, understood, yes, Silk's not going to give the stamp of approval, but you guys could send photos over, the spec,
Videos.
anything, right? And
Yeah.
then if the customer feels good, they could sign off and say, hey, we're good to go. And I know a lot of I think Buyerworld had pivoted to that, especially during COVID times,
Yeah.
of allowing like some of their own people overseas to check things instead of shipping things, which is a great alternative to shave off
Yeah.
time.
Absolutely. I mean, like, to your point, right? I don't even expect the company, the brand to be like, yeah, I'm going to approve it just because I saw Silk inspected and I take Silk's word for it. At least they should be in a position to be like, okay, I take Silk's word for it. This is not meeting my expectations. So go make this again. And once it meets Silk's expectation that, yes, they meet all the conformity requirements, then ship it to me and then I'll give you my stamp of approval. At least that could save time there. And,
Right.
today, let's face it, right, with the cost of shipping, even a courier of a sample, and not to mention the tariffs that are going to get put on that for packages.
Yeah.
It's a drop in the bucket, right? It's a $99 expense for us to go to a factory to inspect a PP sample. You're definitely going to spend more than that, and
Yeah.
not to
Yeah.
mention that extra lead time, right? So that's an interesting area that, frankly, from what you're telling me and why people choose DDP, and I'm taking that away as time is money here, and like time is probably what's causing people to be like, no, I want to go DDP. If you can shorten that time frame, potentially there's more room for companies to be more flexible. And also, for what it's worth, DDP is primarily a China only thing. Now, obviously, if
Yeah.
you want to diversify beyond China, you want to, and not only the time already increased from 100 to 120 or 170 days, you could try to find ways to shorten that curve. That makes a lot of sense. I really enjoyed this. So now let's kind of dive into, we're getting there towards the end of it. I know we're at 43, 45 minutes at this point. So let's probably just dive into a little bit more on what are buyers' expectations. Like when you're talking to a whole bunch of different companies, I know it's different for every company. So pick a company of your choice, and tell us like what is their expectation of quality control, transparency, the delivery dates changing and all that. How do these large retailers and buyers manage this effectively today?
I definitely think they rely on a lot of communication, and that's usually over email. So it's definitely you as the third party, the licensor, the vendor that's making those goods, communicating everything that you can to them, letting them know, hey, I'm seeing a delay, or hey, this is still on track. I know internally at the company, our sales team worked very closely with our production team and our product development team, where we would have bi-weekly meetings. We would go PO by PO. We would state the status, where it's at. That way, if a buyer called up and had any questions at any time, the sales team would be educated on exactly what was happening with that product. And they could, hopefully, it's all good news, deliver the good news of like, no, we're
Yeah,
still good. Obviously, there's a lot of hard conversations that were had to be had from the sales team of letting them know, no, this is delayed, whether it was licensor, natural disaster, things like that. It
COVID.
happens. Get COVID, yeah, all those things
Yeah,
play a factor. But yeah, just kind of making sure that you're communicating to them, giving them the timelines, the deadlines. A big thing that we utilize, like I said before, was time and action calendars. A lot of the times we would also transparently, once we got a time and action calendar from a factory, also send that to a buyer. Say, hey, here's the dates we're marching towards. Here's when you can expect your proto, your PP, your TOP. Here's when we have to have all your approvals by. That was also a strong foundational thing of every time you ask and ship something for an approval, you need to tell your buyers your drop dead date of when you have to have their comments by. So then you're also holding them accountable of, well, if
accountable.
you send me your comments one day late, you've now put your own order at risk and jeopardy of being delayed. So definitely a
Yeah,
lot of communicating, over communicating, and keeping everything streamlined for them was the best. But I can only imagine from their perspective, not being in their shoes before, they're they have to be working with tons of vendors, so they're probably getting communication
called.
from all different directions.
Yeah.
So hopefully they have a system built out where they're filtering in all that information. Because yeah, that's a lot for them to take in.
I I wish. I mean, I don't know. From what I can tell, like obviously there's PLMs, but for the most part, it's Microsoft Outlook.
Yeah,
That's a system that's
yeah,
driving a lot of the folders and just managing things, right? So, perhaps we'll come to the last question here, right? If you could advise your former client self, you've been a client, you've been an importer. In today's day and age, now let's just look at it from this particular context of today, what's happening with tariffs and all the chaos in the world of transportation, amongst others. What is the advice you would give yourself on what you should do? We're at the fag end of preparing for essentially this holiday season, which is pretty much majority of inventory. So, what would you be doing today to hedge the risk to make sure that you're prepared well and you're in a good place for being able to sell products this holiday season?
it's all about planning ahead. A big thing that I loved was those timelines, setting up, working backwards, knowing that, okay, if I need to deliver the goods by this date, let's make sure we start designing or developing this far out with those lead times that we talked about, 170 days. That's a long time to work backwards from and start like thinking about those things. But if you're not planning ahead and getting those things sorted out early on, then all these factors that happen later, tariffs and all those things, you're really not prepared to handle any of those shifts and changes.
Okay,
So the further in advance you can plan, hopefully you can pivot better later down the line, and hopefully
makes
not
sense.
have poor customer service with your clients.
Okay. So take away the holiday season and sales for this, but like, what do you do? What would you recommend for companies to be like? You need to idiot-proof your supply chain today, or prevent disruptions from coming. Where would you say they should be putting in their efforts, today to focus on that? Is it sourcing? Is it reducing the number of SKUs? Is it what would you say? Cash flow?
Yeah. With the tariff specifically, it's a big thing on sourcing. You really need to put all your efforts in trying to diversify. We love that word in the production world, diversify your matrix. But
Yeah.
really trying to get ahead of the game. You have to have factories that are in multiple countries of origin. You can't just have all your eggs in one basket, especially with things right now. Who knows what tariffs are going to be in a country the
Hmm.
next day? You're not sure. So really trying to level out and distribute all of your production across multiple countries. That's probably going to be the best game plan. That's going to be hard because costs are going to fluctuate and tariffs are going to change, but really building a strong foundation and getting relationships with vendors and factories in multiple countries of origin is definitely going to be a proponent. So like, I think if you want to send people to go overseas and source factories, do that. If you want to use Silq and our services of vetting your factories, also do that, just depending on where you have manpower. But I think
Yeah.
sourcing is going to be a big thing right now with tariffs.
Lovely. Christine, thank you. Thank you very much for this. I'm going to do a quick recap of everything we spoke about at a high level for the people who want to just listen to the TLDR or the 2-minute version of what we discussed here. And feel free to jump in along the way and correct me. Obviously, I think this whole concept of how, importers today, whether you're a brand or you're a licensed apparel manufacturer or you're a buyer who works for the large retailer, the things that you need to be worried about, I think the one word to sum it up is planning. Planning cannot be, something that you can take lightly. It's not something you can wing. We've worked with a number of companies who think they can do things in the fast in 2 months or so. So recapping quickly, plan ahead of time. You need, at least 120 days to be able to make a product from essentially the concept approved sample to delivery. So working with the different stakeholders, your supplier being one, a QC company, or your own staff doing QC is absolutely mandatory for you to be able to kind of accelerate, not only just from a quality perspective, but accelerate the timelines necessarily and have control over. And then that brings you to the next piece, which is essentially your freight forwarding company, your customs broker, amongst other things. Those are the different stakeholders you need to be working with, apart from the licensor and others who approve samples. So that's non-negotiable today. In terms of tooling, you should be thinking about leveraging AI, whether you're building SOPs, whether you're essentially thinking about how you could accelerate timelines on sample development ideas, amongst other things. And most importantly, doing more project planning. Like, hey, this is where we are. What do you think we can do? Having that essential interface, leveraging AI is becoming more and more necessary. And three, effectively coming to that place where you're leveraging an inspection company to accelerate the sample inspection and leveraging an inspection company to make sure that the goods leave on time. Those are areas that you should be thinking about. Four, and the last point is sourcing, diversifying your sourcing. It's no more dual sourcing, it's multi-sourcing. You gotta have, factories at different price points, different delivery timelines. The companies that are winning today are not the ones that can forecast well. The companies that are going to win this essential apocalypse are the companies that have options. You have the flexibility. That's effectively what we kind of summed up across the board. And not to mention, we went into in depth about how companies manage this complexity in different companies along the way. So with that, I'd like to bring the show to a close. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. And if you're interested to know more about, how do you build a brand, how do you, scale a brand, Christine is available to talk to you. You can find her on LinkedIn. You can find her on email. Her email is christine@onesilq.com. And obviously, my email is ram@onesilq.com. Happy to talk to any of you guys who are looking for, more advice or a demo of the Silq app. We'd be happy to work with you on that. With that, thank you very much, everybody. You have a good day.
Thank you.